Good evening. I want to welcome you here tonight. For those of you who've been, my glasses just broke, of course. For those of you who've been coming to our lecture series this fall, we are continuing tonight in an incredible string of lectures that we've had, each one standing room only, each one bringing a different point of view about the various design professions. Tonight is no exception. I think tonight's lecturer, David Lake, this is both timely as well as timeless. Timely because as we know, the Austin Public Library opened this past weekend. Timeless because David's firm has been leading very much in the area of sustainable design for the last 30 years. So an incredible combination that we see of both the longevity as well as the currency of the work. But before we get any further, most important things always come first, our reception. The reception that we're going to have after the lecture that'll take place in the Battle Hall Reading Room. Tonight's lecture, if I can read with my broken glasses, tonight's reception is sponsored by, and just wait for it, International Interior Design Association, Texas, Oklahoma, Chapter, Austin City Center Council will be sponsoring that, and you won't be able to have anything to drink unless you can repeat that. So be thinking about that as you go forward on that. Tonight's lecture is going to be introduced by our own Juan Moreau. Juan really wanted to have the opportunity to introduce David, and just a few short words about Juan, because we know that Juan has no short words when he gets up here to talk for himself. He is the Associate Dean for Undergraduate Programs. He is the David Bruton Jr. Centennial Professor in Urban Design. He's a Distinguished Teaching Professor. He's in the Academy of Distinguished Teachers at the University of Texas. He has a Regents Outstanding Teaching Award. And of course, his firm, Miro Rivera, 2016 Architecture Firm of the Year by the Texas Society of Architects. So many awards in the last year that we would not have time for our lecturer if I read those to you. But I will mention one on last Wednesday night, just about a week ago. His firm also won one of 4 awards for green architecture in Austin as part of that awards ceremony. So Juan, would you come up here?
Thank you, Michelle. It's really an honor for me to welcome to our school David Lake. It's been a long time, and we felt like in the events and lectures and exhibitions committee that was time to have David speak to the school, and our timing has been perfect, impeccable. I mean, the library opened on Saturday. It feels like we had it all perfectly planned to have the lecture just 2 days after the opening of the library, and we're very happy because it's been in the news everywhere. It's a great addition to Austin to have one of what I think is going to become one of the most iconic civic buildings in the city by Lake Flato. It's good to also have David here because he is a native Austinite, so he's a native son of the city and of the program. He's one of our most renowned alumnus from the school. He went to UT, so for all the students here, you know that there's a chance to become one of the best known architects in the country if you go to UT. So you're in the right place. You're in the right place. And one of the things that I wanted to tell us a little bit the way they started and the awards, but I wanted to tell also a few things about why I think the work of Lake Flato is significant. David and Ted Flato founded Lake Flato in 1984. And over the last 30-some years, they have really become probably the most recognized architectural firm in Texas, and in terms of the recognition it has received. And I think that is really incredible to think when you read the number of awards. They have won more than 270 awards in this time, and it's really remarkable when you think about the consistency of the number of awards they have been winning. And you know, for all architects in Texas, when we submit to the Texas Society of Architects Awards, it's always about whether we're going to win or not. For Lake Flato, it's more how many awards they're going to win. That's the only kind of, you know, the only kind of mystery of the year, right? You know, as opposed to the rest of us. And it's really like remarkable to see over the years how consistent they have been in continuing to define the excellence, design excellence that is expected from architects in Texas and beyond. So I think that they won the Texas Firm Achievement Award, and then they won the AIA National Firm Award. And this is very important to stop for a second. I mean, obviously we kind of go over the incredible number of awards, but I want to point out to that one because I think it's very significant for us in Texas to have this recognition national. There are a lot of firms in this country doing very good work, and it's very hard. It's only one per year that is recognized, and they were recognized in 2004. And it's really in a way, has put Texas in the map in a different way because it's a very, very valued recognition from peers. And beyond the awards, I wanted to talk about a couple of things that I think are also very important in terms of the contributions that Lake Flato have done over the years. Obviously, one of them is very and Dean Addington has referred to the sustainability as being very relevant these days. In an interesting way, they were pioneers. They were sustainable architects before we knew what that meant or what we didn't have a name for that. I think David always liked to say that they were doing sustainable buildings before there was a word for that, you know, and that's has had an impact. But beyond the notion of what sustainability means today, which is a little bit of a very tired term in terms of it has been used now so much and in so many different ways that it's hard to know what it means anymore. I think for me the important thing is that their work and the way they see sustainability, to me, connects with a very strong American tradition, the tradition of reconnecting with nature in a meaningful way. So a connection with nature in a meaningful way, even if they brought that to our attention during their early work and all the way until the work they're doing today, is very much something that has been part of the Americas. And when I say American, I'm not even referring just to the US. This is a very much part of something that we see in the Americas since pre-Columbian times, the meaningful connections with the landscape. This is the reading of the mythical landscape as something meaningful for everything you build. And it goes all the way to the recognition of national parks in the US. So it's a very strong connection to nature. And this is something that I think is very important, the way they have made that very natural, the sense that that's a very important thing for architects to think about. The building is not just an object. The building is a relationship with the place where the building is located. And this is something that I think continues beautifully, that tradition that architects like Frank Lloyd Wright, Fay Jones did very well in the US, and this is the great contribution of many modern architects in the US to the modern movement as opposed to Europe, where the objects were more seen as isolated. In the case of these great masters, it was very much about that relationship, the way Lake Flato has continued in that regard. I think that it's actually interesting because it's not only something that was happening in Mexico, in the US, when you think about architects like Barragán, also in Mexico, defined that relationship as essential in their work. It was not so much about the object, it's about the flow from the inside to the outside, the courtyards, the connection with history, the connection with tradition in ways that it was very meaningful as a connection to a place. And the way they did it, which is, I think is very important, they did it in a way that is almost taught to the world what Texas architecture is. You know, whether we like it or not, in a way, a lot of people think of architecture in Texas as the architecture of Lake Flato, the same way that a lot of people think of the architecture of Mexico in the work of Barragán and Legorreta, or the architecture of Australia as the Glen Mercott. So they capture, in a way, a land that feels still for a lot of people exotic and distant. Like Texas, for a lot of people, even in the US, it feels like a very kind of remote and almost exotic land, and like Mexico or Australia was. And a lot of people now think of architecture in Texas as something defined by what the work of Lake Flato has been showing over these years. And is very significant in that regard, because it has created a school. It has created a lot of architects that are trying to follow, their steps in terms of trying to make architecture that is meaningful in that way. And they have seen that it's not necessarily as easy. And this is one of the things that I wanted to, especially specifically to the students, that I wanted to emphasize, that Lake Flato makes things look very easy, but it's deceivingly easy. They're very good designers. So it's not only to have the intention of connecting with the land, you have to have the ability to have the design sensibility and the quality of detailing to execute that idea well. And that's what they do very well. And they're not necessarily looking for the bold forms of the innovation through kind of form creation. Is very much about this ability to make buildings, I think in your own words, I've read somewhere, that are practical, timeless, and ultimately beautiful. I mean, that's a very kind of simple approach, but it's not so easy. So the design is the key, and I think that that's one of the things for our students that is important to remember. Design makes a difference. So you need to be very carefully looking at the projects that David is going to show us. I don't know which projects are going to be, but you'll see that just the way they put everything together. You look at some of their projects and everybody looks and say, how do they do it? Why does it look this way? How can they make it feel so naturally in the place? And it's all design. So I would like our students in the school today to really try to pay attention to this. The importance of design is the key to make this successful. So please help me in joining, in welcoming David to the school.
Good job. Thank you, Juan, and thank you, Dean. Welcome to Texas. We're lucky to have you. I'm going to do a little romp through some Lake Flato history, then followed by 3 in-depth, how's it sound, okay? 3 in-depth kind of examples of how our process shapes architecture. And then we're going to run through some urban district making. So hope this is painless, insightful, whatever. So let me go back a moment. So Lake Flato, this is Ted and Katie Flato's ranch at the West Fork of the Nueces. Every year, all of us go out to the Kickapoo, and we are immersed in nature. And as a firm, I think architecture is a journey. It requires incredible people. And we're lucky enough to have some fabulous people who work with us and collaborate. And the first thing we do when we get there, it's Texas, and what do? We build that. We build shade, shade, more shade. And then we were inspired early on from O'Neill Ford and others. In fact, I should give a shout out to the Right Reverend Dr. Garrison here. Let's see, I graduated 41 years ago. Dr. Garrison began to speak, you were teaching 43 years ago. Wow, you're really young looking. Why do you have more hair? So actually, the university has been very pivotal in my education, Ted's education. Many of the people who work with us are graduates, and Plenty Fisk has been a major shaper. And we were doing caliche block way back when sustainable buildings were not even talked about. So from that point, we started doing buildings in and out of the landscape. This is a dialogue where the client, where the wife wanted a house and the husband wanted a screen porch or a tent. And so they got a screen porch. And this is kind of a walkthrough of porches. And I think porches are that beautiful man-made, I like that they're man-made elements where you're out of doors. And they're this fragile ecosystem that we make that is a boundary between nature and the man-made. And most recently, this beautiful house that Ted designed on Marble Falls. And then we've started doing arboretums, buildings of the landscape in Naples, other places, each place responding to sun and shade. And most recently, in the Big Bend, this beautiful rusty thing that houses that beast, a dinosaur. And this is the Quetzalcoatl, our original pterodactyl, native to Texas, kind of like the Dean, but the Dean's prettier. Yeah, it's all open air, superstructure, all about being light on the land. And then this is ASU's campus, which we were lucky enough to work with Christy tonight and more of that later, but more PV array porches and really getting a bit bigger scale, all porches. This is a sombria at the arena, a home for 18,500. This is during the finals. We like to say the Spurs won because of the building. Come on, that was pretty funny. My wife says I'm not supposed to say that. I'm supposed to laugh at all my jokes. Another porch for the arena, greeting 18,500. And we've done porches across the United States. We've completed work in 39 states, Mexico, and the Cayman Islands. And I'm going to start with a project in San Antonio on the river called Confluence Park. Bob Harris, my partner, and Tina Florian were the lead designers on this amazing job. This was about creating a visitor center on the San Antonio River that was all about engaging the place and talking about how water can be preserved. We started, as we always do, with integrated design charrette and made very significant aspirations about how the building should perform, how the owners and the users and the visitors should engage the building. We begin this without any thought about what the building should look like. It's more about performance criteria. And we also had some amazing collaborations with Andrew Cutlass, in this case, with Matsis. We brought him in as kind of an artist, sculptor. He's an architect. He does these beautiful shaped forms, and he led us in a path that we would never have gone in. And part of our journey when working with all these great consultants is to go on paths that you can't anticipate. So site, water, how does water shape the building? This lovely idea about water and the umbrella cascading off versus a funnel on the upper right. And we decided to go with a funnel shape to begin to do that. Singing in the rain, toroidal shapes that led to the first design, which is steel structure as a tent with wood. We did a bunch of analysis. We found that we could do this more durably with concrete, longer lasting, and we began looking at shaping this. These are all forms that are being replicated. There's only 2 different forms, replicated in shape. So that was all shaped by a router, routed all this with a computer. Computer spit out this shape. The shape was fiberglass, and into that fiberglass shape were these concrete forms that then end up getting erected on site. And that's kind of the wonderful character of the concrete, very rustic. It is what it is, and let it be what it is. And now the petals are going up as we speak. So you can see how the funnel shape, the water cascades from the front down, and these are collection points. Each of the legs goes into a cistern. It keeps every bit of water that falls on the site in the site. Every toilet is flushed with water. All the showers that are for bicyclists are flushed with rainwater. All the irrigation is done with rainwater. There is no rainwater brought from the site. It's effectively a net zero water project. Here's the form going up with the holes in the forms for daylight to stream through. And then there it is erected. And it should be finished in 4 months, and that's what it's supposed to look like. And this is what it's like when it's raining. So Confluence Park is really shaped by water. It began as a water element. It was all about how we worked with biohabitats, a lot of different designers, to craft a special rainwater harvesting porch. The Whitty Museum, we've been working with the Whitty Museum for 25 years. It's our longest client. I guess they are the most patient. 25 years is a long time. We've done 7 different master plans, but we started with Brackinridge Park, and the beautiful, if you ever go to San Antonio, you need to go to the Sunken Gardens and see these incredible array of WPA projects that continue to inspire us for their craft and for their beauty of just regional materials. And that inspired us to integrate, this is the 4th generation concrete sculptor, and there he is sculpting on the left, and this is the entranceway into the new Whitty for the children's entry garden. And Whitty play is evident all over the site. And so when we were starting this 4th phase of the Whitty, we were working with Gallagher and Associates, the really fine exhibit designer in DC and New York, and we decided the building should be part of the exhibits, and the building should speak to history and to place and to experience. So we said, well, we think dinosaurs should romp all over the facade. So these are actual dinosaur footprints that were cast by the paleontologist, sand cast, and then we cast them into concrete, and you can see the shape, the size of the scale of that dinosaur footprint. This happens to be a T-Rex footprint, and then you can see the byproduct of it in the stone itself. And yet, oh my gosh, another porch. This is actually a lab for junior high kids to engage with environment and to do all kinds of science exhibits. There is a tree coming out of that porch, a cypress, actually. If you go back, that trunk right there on the left is a 180-year-old cypress tree. And then another pterodactyl. I mean, we have to be the only architects on the planet that have done 2 pterodactyl porches. So we're uniquely qualified. This is actually the entrance to the porch, and I'm now going to attempt to do this video. We'll see how. I am such a Luddite. It's pathetic. Yes, okay, Zeke. All right. Thank you, Zeke. So this is actually going to take you on a journey. This is an early video that we showed the Whitty, and you're flying over the building. This is the new Whitty in the middle. That's the old Pioneer building with the red tile roof. You're flying over the event center on the right. There's the entrance with the school buses for the school kids, and on the far right, the San Antonio River. This is before, and that's after. That is the image of the building. We've got water cascading on the left. The building, the walls itself are out of old yellow limestone, so the building talks about weathered stone, brick, the history of building materials. Another image showing the very front door on the right, and you can see the flying pterodactyl in the middle. So this is Discovery Walk. So as you're moving up from the garage to the front door, you're discovering history, deep Texas time, and off we go. So we often use these tools to especially talk to specific issues about experience. That's the front door portal. You gotta like movies, because I don't have to say anything. So there is a video above the pterodactyl. As you come in, you see pterodactyls flying over you. That's before, and that is after. So we saved and repurposed 100,000 square feet of existing building, added 80,000 square feet of new building. This is a rain garden. Every bit of water that falls on the Whitty cascades and is caught by bioswales before it goes back into the river. There are the pterodactyls overhead. the archway, you come into the building through a great arch. The old Whitty had 3 Romanesque arches, so we thought, well, we'll just do one big 26-foot arch. And there's the pterodactyl with the video above it. So the front door is actually, as you're waiting for your ticket, you're flying with the Quetzalcoatlus. As you go through the arch, you go into deep Texas time on the right. We always love road cuts because they talk about the history of how the orogeny of Texas and the thousands of years, hundreds of years, millions of years, and that becomes the wall panels that are the exhibit of the building. And as you move around, you're looking towards the backyard, towards the river, and the dinosaur exhibit is toward the rear. Lots of light. Unlike other museums, the great thing about working with a science museum is it's not light sensitive. All the fossils are actually cast polymer fossils, so they can take lots of light. Now we're rotating and looking into the orientation theater in the lower half. Up above is actually the Pecos sandstone overhang. So you understand kind of deep Texas time orientation of the entire museum, and eventually we'll move up to that limestone grotto above us. So it's a way of thinking about working with Gallagher and Associates and having the exhibit be integral to the building experience. So now we're in the Dino Hall. As we move out to the backyard, the glass, which faces southwest, is actually coated with imagery, knocks down the sun. We rotate back around and look back towards the Great Arch, and that's the finished project. There's lots of technology embedded throughout these elements. And we do have an encroaching sea, no question. Looking back towards the backyard and the river. And then at night. So the very different character at night, lots of interesting theatrical lighting we had to achieve during the day versus the night. So the Texas Wild Gallery is the old part of the museum that we had to repurpose with dioramas until you move through the old dioramas that have been restored, past the bison, and you look up to the Texas sky, which is changing, and there's a thunderstorm that happens. So believe it or not, that's the before, and that is the after. So really difficult to do a 14-foot ceiling and trying to get exhibits integrated into a low ceiling, and we work with a structural engineer in particular to figure out how to do that, and how also to make a lot of these exhibits, you don't feel roped off. You feel encouraged to engage the tactile nature of the exhibits. And then you can see the water on the left and the croc. And then we're going to go upstairs to the rock shelter overhang of the Pecos. So the Pecos culture in far west Texas, you go past the overhang, the entrance is to the left. You go into the orientation theater for Pecos. So the Pecos culture, these incredible pictographs are 8,000 years old. They're actually, the Whitty Museum is the major entity that takes care of the entire Pecos culture in terms of all the rock shelters. So we worked with these incredible fabricators from San Diego who built all this faux limestone rock and gravel and converted basically a very mundane second floor experience into this very hands-on interactive, both technologically as well as just visually interactive space. All the, I love Jimi Hendrix. All the pictographs are actually projected onto the fabric of the stone, and so you can rotate through the different major caves of the Pecos culture. And that's actually a photograph, not a rendering. So from the overhang, you're looking out to the river, past the Quetzalcoatl and the exhibits. The sun slides through the space, and you're looking towards the arched on the front door of the great opening. And then we go back down again. So this was really helpful to the witty to be able to show how the building engaged exhibits, how exhibits were intrinsically part of the experience, how they could fundraise for the building. They had to raise over $100 million, which is not an easy task in San Antonio, Texas. And there's another before looking through the windows, showing how the windows become the exhibits. And the one I really love is the next one, which shows the deep forest green of the Cretaceous area when you're looking out towards the river, but you're engaged with these exhibits. So this tool was really helpful to the museum for not only fundraising, but for the exhibits, staff, curators to really understand how the project worked. So the next building is the third building, and then after that, we'll do a quick kind of urban design segment. But the library just opened. It's been a journey, like every project. It's involved quite a few consultants, and we always imagined the library as a portal not only to knowledge, but also to the environment, and that there was intrinsically linked. And having grown up in Austin, as a citizen, we've never had our own living room. We've never had our own kind of public space to call our own, to be engaged in landscape and also be engaged in a man-made environment that was very much sympathetic to the landscape. So I'm tired of talking. So Jonathan Smith is going to come up here and walk through. So Jonathan's associate partner. How many years did you work on this project?
I've been working on the library for roughly the last 11,000 hours of my career. So longer than I was, not that I'm counting.
Okay, with that, I'm sitting down.
Longer than I was sitting in the seats here getting my B.Arch from UT. So I really want to talk about the process of how the library was shaped through light. And so here's a nice sketch from David's sketchbook early on. The library being shaped by light was really something that we talked about early on, even before we got the job, which was fascinating and something that kept me awake late many nights. As the confluence image that David showed earlier, we like to begin all these projects with an integrated design workshop. And really what that means is getting everyone in the room who has some ability to have an impact on sustainability and put them all in a room together before we resist our architect urges to get out our sketchbooks and start designing the building. And so it's really about setting measurable goals and metrics that we then can follow through the entire design. So I could talk about this building for another 11,000 hours, but I'm just going to talk really about daylight today and the daylight in the building. So from that integrated design workshop, this is one of the sketches that came out of it from the daylight team. And this really starts to show you how on our really constrained 40,000 square foot site, that top image there is a section, how we really need the roof or the fifth facade to really do the bulk of the work in daylighting this project. And there you can see the measurable goal from the daylighting charrette there says 75% daylight with views. That's foreshadowing. We did this sort of in two ways. We did it analog and we did it digital. And the way we did it sort of analog, and one of the most, I think, helpful things that we did on the entire job was you're going to see a theme of workshops. We did another workshop, another 2-day workshop with all of the stakeholders that could really impact the daylighting. So the daylighting designer, the artificial lighting designer, the interiors, and the architects. We were joint ventured with Shepley Bulfinch on this project. So for all you students out there, how to do this, here's a quick how-to so you can go home tonight and do your own daylighting workshop or charrette with your daylighting designers. Step one is build a 1/4-inch scale model of your space. In our space, it was a atrium, 6 floors, so it's a fairly large model. The reason we called it a dollhouse model was because the colors on all the walls and different spaces within the building need to be fairly accurate. You can't build it out of black foam core and have it perform the same. Next, you choose a vantage point within the model and start taking photos. And we use this not only as a daylighting tool, but also as a really important design tool. This moved the bridges and the stairs around within the atrium just by using that model. And then step 3 is getting a fancy luminance mapping so you can really understand where the daylighting is coming from. So here you can see that sort of lightsaber thing looking in the middle. There is our central skylight that's doing the bulk of the work here. And then step 4, like anything in design, is iterating over again. And so Gus there on the left in the blue shirt and I spent a large portion of the night between the 2 days of the daylighting workshop rebuilding a different roof for the building and testing it out the next day. So we learned a lot from that, just a few quick things that we learned that made it through that we wouldn't have known about had we not had that daylighting workshop. One was basically the guardrails around the atrium and how hugely important those were to daylighting. We originally had those as clear glass and they got changed to an opaque white. The other big one I'll mention is just on the north side of the atrium, there's 2 large south-facing walls. And we had thought originally that those walls might end up being green walls, but when we put our little piece of green felt in the daylighting model, it sucked out almost all the light. So they ended up being these really bright white panels to really harvest the daylight in the space. So along with the analog was also the digital. We worked really closely with the Integrated Design Lab out of Seattle. They were our daylighting consultants, and we ran through all the paces in digital models as well, trying to tune and hone and work through different options. So here, if you went to the library this past weekend, here's what it looks like with the atrium there in the middle. And you can get a rough sense here about how we were using that center space to really bounce light around and off of those guardrails like I was mentioning and bring it into space. So as well as the 5th facade on the roof, the other 4 facades were super important as well. And so we really wanted to fine-tune those to continue to make this the best daylit library in the country. We did that in a similar fashion where everything from the floor-to-floor height to the aspect ratio to the sill height to the scrim to the perforation to the color of the scrim was studied and worked through to get us to a point where we ended up with a 50% opacity on those screens on the exterior of the building to shade the glass and to shade the exterior, but also bringing in enough daylight for everybody. Let's see here. There's some extra, I got some extra slides in here. There we go. So this continued all the way through construction. This didn't just end at design. So on the slide there on the left is my co-conspirator Daniel Lazarin with a light meter, and we are standing on scaffolding 6.5 stories in the air, measuring the light on the underside of the very, 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 very top of the skylight, which when you're in the library doesn't look like it's 15 feet tall, but it's a fairly large space. And so we really wanted to test and verify as we were moving down the building, as they were pulling the scaffolding out, we were constantly climbing up on it and taking daylight measurements. And then this is the day where I could start sleeping at night. So I showed up this Tuesday morning and got up and climbed up the scaffolding. The contractor called this the dance floor. So we're hanging out on the dance floor and looked up, and you could see just the steel studs and how much light was grazing off the steel studs and bouncing into the space. And I got really excited. And so on the left is the rendering that we produced at the end of construction documents for City Council, and on the right is an image from a couple of months ago. Now that image on the right is full of happy, smiling children and people running up and down the stairs, but you can get a sense for the space. The other thing on the right-hand image here, this summer I really felt like we had gotten over the finish line when I was in the atrium doing a punch list, and I could feel a cloud go overhead. It was really awesome. There are not many buildings where you are that in touch with what's going on outside. So to come full circle, what started as setting measurable goals during the integrated design charrette workshop really ended with actually going through and measuring those goals. And so this is where we are to date. We're tracking LEED Platinum, and you saw that first slide written in pen was 75%. We managed to crank that up a little bit to 80% of the regular occupied spaces. So with that, I will hand it back over to David to talk about some of his beautiful sketches and hang out for the 4th floor.
So, squiggly sketches. Owen Kappelman, 43 years ago, made me keep a sketchbook, and he didn't care what the sketches were of. I just had to do a sketchbook a day, as we all did if we were in Owen Kappelman's class. And today I'm at my 171st or 2nd sketchbook. I think it's really important as students that you make that visceral connection from your brain, your head, your whatever, to the hand, and have that capacity to draw in front of a client is still far more magical and far more compelling than getting in a computer and routing it through a computer and not being able to immediately make quick movements that are fluid and personal. I mean, I think the computer is an incredible tool. We've shown examples of how incredible a tool it can be, but I still think communicating is the most important tool an architect can have. Communicating ideas to the client, being able to have a conversation with users and everyone in the room, and being able to make quick sketches and to have the sketches then become digital is a really great tool. So I'd really, everybody get your pencils out. Put the computer away, even for just a day. So early sketches of the atrium, shaping of the atrium, testing these sketches against the daylighting models, funny clay blocks. And actually the remarkable story about this is we made this clay model in about, 20 minutes. We showed it, we had a meeting with the librarian, Brenda Branch, who retired this year, and I saw her yesterday, and it was so fun to see Brenda just beaming, because she's one, for 30 years, she's been in the library system of Austin. She's been trying to get a central library for 25 years. And it was great to sit in front of Brenda with this clay model and show her this ridiculous model. And she got it. She said, oh, it's got a special roof. That's really what this model is. It's a special roof. Okay, so the plan. The idea behind the library was to animate the cityscape, make the whole west end of 2nd more animated. So there's a porch, a cafe that flows out to 2nd. On the bikeway, Shoal Creek. On the right, there's an entrance from the Shoal Creek Hike and Bike Trail. We convinced Brenda that we needed to have 3 entrances. One on Cesar Chavez that brings, I mean, how many times has Cesar Chavez closed because of an event? Come on, how many? Any guesses? This is the interactive part where you're supposed to say 30%. Okay, that's right, 30%. So we made an effort to have a huge event room that spills out to Cesar Chavez. It also spills over to the Seahome lawn. We thought we could imagine the book festival and other festivals, ACL, using this event room, music, cinema, readings, an amphitheater that faces Shoal Creek, had a chamber orchestra or quintet there Saturday. Lots of people were sitting there looking out to Shoal Creek, so it's very connected. So we imagine the atrium as more than just a light-giving element. We imagine the atrium as a living room. And in order to make it a living room, we had to scale the zones of a 6-story space down. So the Shoal Creek Amphitheater is kind of a double height space looking out to Shoal Creek. The children's teens wing, which is the red oval, is at the mid-level of the library, and the top is the daylit atrium penthouse level that is the rooftop garden, the reading porch. And those zones and the wooden bridges and stairs tend to scale the atrium down. One of the major challenges behind making the atrium a living room is the acoustics. I don't know. This is actually pretty dead in here. So if you go in the library and you clap your hands, it's a fairly acoustically dead space, and we achieve that by, maybe we should go to the next image. Oh, we were already there. You can go next, just forget the plans, they're boring. Yeah, so actually, the entire ceiling of the atrium is acoustic plaster. It's absorbing sound, not reflecting it, and but it is bouncing light. And then this is a perforated metal wall panel with highly acoustic attenuation panel behind it. So 2 of the major surfaces in that atrium are absorbing sound. It's not bouncing off of more than 2 walls. There you are on the left, before and after, just to show the nature of the construction, concrete frame construction. When we were spanning across delicate spaces, the steel glass bridge, we worked with Tom Taylor at Datum Engineering. He was there Saturday. He's a lovely man, and we argued about the top chord, right, Jonathan? It was a...
We tried to keep everything out of the top of the skylight, which is really, really important. So the only piece of infrastructure that spans across that skylight are those large steel tubes at the very, very top, and the mullions that directly align with them. We had to work really, really hard to get rid of all the cross bracing. And similarly, we had to work really hard. David was talking about the underside of that, the acoustical plaster ceiling. There was a dude covered in plaster on his back. His beard was like an entire thing of plaster up there during construction, trying to get that perfect for us. It was a real challenge to get these spaces.
So at level 3, the children's wing, the circular openings, you can sit in those openings, and kids were sitting in all those round openings. It was pretty fun. We got carried away with circles.
Yeah.
These are salvaged gears from the Seahome treatment plant. On the left is the screen porch, so there's 2 screen porches that stack. There's a lot of concern that somebody was going to throw a book out of the screen porch, but we convinced the librarian that no, we're going to do screen porches so the bugs can't get in. And then that's a view looking up at Austin's living room. And this kind of Pyreneesian movement of stairs and bridges. And there's a reason, there's a method to the madness. When we're doing the daylighting model, we noticed that when you stack the stairs or the bridges, they created a huge dark zone from the skylight above. So by staggering everything, it actually made the light more dispersed as it moved down 5 floors.
Similarly with the lighting under the bridges, that all came out of the daylighting charrette. And they were well daylit under the bridges, but your perception was they were darker. And so we added those LED strips during CDs. So the 3rd level is really about the children's and teens. The 4th level is where you really start to see a library. There are stacks. There's this great reading porch. And then there's a more sort of buttoned up reading room. This is that space, a sort of great space, great civic reading room. And you can check this out for events. And in this space, there's a great tradition within libraries of quotes about reading and knowledge and books being, carved into them, put on them, and we wanted to continue that tradition. We did it in a slightly different way. We water jetted 3/8-inch plate aluminum and then got it anodized. And we worked really closely with the subcontractor on this, Kovac, to get this worked out, and it turned out really great. You get these great shadows in the morning when the sun is coming in, and you can just stand here all day and read this. It's also becoming a big deal in selfies. Lots of selfies being taken in front of this. And then there's the children's porch on the 3rd level, and then we unfortunately call this one the adult porch on the 4th level. But it is also a great outdoor civic space. It's got incredible light, and we perched it right at the corner of Shoal Creek and Lady Bird Lake, and it's on the southeast corner of the building to really catch the breezes. And even on the really hot days during the summer when it was under construction, it was still relatively comfortable out there. Throughout the building, but this is one on the 4th level, are these shared learning rooms. So libraries are no longer a warehouse for books. They're a civic space and a space for people to start businesses, a place for people to meet. And so throughout the building, there are technology-rich conference rooms that people can check out just like a book and use. And then throughout the whole atrium, but in particular on the 4th level, you get these great sort of perches where you can go and hang out and take a book or an iPad that you've checked out and just hang out on the edge and people watch.
So up on the roof, so 6th floor penthouse roof. On the left, before and after, how the superstructure works, the steel girdered bridges, which then became wood. There was a lot of conversation about the nature of the bridges and agoraphobic people. So we raised the wood up, we made them opaque so people could walk on these bridges without worrying about height.
We also worked with a structural engineer to make sure they weren't bouncy.
Butterfly garden, so the lacy oak on top. Superstructure carries about 5.5 feet of earth over styrofoam, over waterproofing. We've had butterflies up there already.
Yep.
And then the PV porch. It was great on Saturday to see these families up there reading already. On this porch, so finally Austin has a place where you can go and see the expanse of our incredible Lady Bird Lake, Shoal Creek, downtown, with views in 360 degrees.
Yep. With 180 kilowatts of energy being produced above them.
And then there it is from Auditorium Shores looking back, kind of the library as a welcoming lantern.
We've got another video.
Not done yet. So this is a video of opening day, which is the greatest, one of my greatest days of my career, was to see this building open. This is the view from the penthouse level looking back to the clear stories, to the rooftop, and then this is from the Shoal Creek is to my back. I'm looking up into the atrium and seeing the skylighter on the right that Jonathan talked about that's 15 feet deep and the lightweight trusses. And this was really fun to see how animated the space was when people were moving up and down the stairs and traversing the bridges. So let's see, how am I doing, Zeke, on time? Where are we? 40 minutes. Who wants to go to San Antonio for Pearl, a quick tour of Pearl? Come on, this is also the interactive part. If you're not going to be, you want to go to Pearl? Okay. So, in addition to designing individual buildings, I think the greatest challenge we face as architects is to create spaces that are authentic, real, integrated, culturally sound, and make our cities better. In particular, making the downtown stronger, more dense, more functional, more multi-purpose, multi-use, and becoming true destinations for everyone. Density is our friend. I'm going to start with a project on Broadway corridor. This is 1221 Broadway, the first loft building in the Broadway corridor. It was completed 10 years ago, so I was part of the development team, and the Lake Flato was also the designer. This is before, and that's after. It was a shell of a building that had been left for 9 years, and we converted it into 300 apartments before on the left, and then green screens growing vines up 5 floors. Yes, it can be done. A little bit of drip irrigation and stuff grows all over. And then these are the bridges that glow at night that connect the building across Avenue B. And then right next to this project is the Pearl. On the left, above is the before image, and below, but the main thing is it's almost 1.2 million square feet now. 400,000 feet was repurposed, and you can see all the people that are part of it. It's a true mixed-use project. And then this is the river. We worked with the San Antonio River Authority to redesign the turnaround basin at the Pearl for River North, and it was this, and now it's that. That is the turnaround lake basin, which is 300 feet long, looking towards Hotel Emma on the right, and you can be downtown on this trail in about 10 minutes on the right. And then an amphitheater that engages the boat dock, Friday movies, lots of weddings. it's become a major hangout space on the river in San Antonio. And we imagine this to be a place for San Antonians. The Riverwalk is not a citizen-friendly environment. It's just overrun with tourists, and so we needed our own river. And Kit Goldsberry of Silver Ventures wanted this to be about culinary arts and make it a gathering place that's extraordinarily important to the culinary arts of South America. So the Culinary Institute of America has a new school there, has over 200 students now. There are 18 restaurants at Pearl. This is a before image looking on access to the old brew house, which we preserved. There was no streets at Pearl. It was totally paved. And now here it is after. Over 1,000 trees have been planted, bioswales have been put in. I love this yoga class image in front of the old administrative building at Pearl. And this is a shout out to Christy Tenike right there in the front row. Come on, Christy. Christy designed the engaging water feature. This crazy concrete frame she turned into a remarkable superstructure with, it's got to be the world's best pool up on top of that superstructure. That is the pool for the high-end apartments. To the left, we repurposed all the signage, all the vats, everything, all the rainwater gets harvested. So Christy designed this plaza here on the right in front of the Hotel Emma and the Sellers building, which is where the Pearl sign is. The food hall is to the left. This is during the market. So now Pearl has every weekend 4,000 people coming to the farmers market. For Tamale Festival, it's 18,000 people or more. So designing a new place with streets and sidewalks. Here's the repurposed vats into rainwater harvesting, overgrown vines, and Christie's version of a light show. And finally, just to talk about on the boards. So we've started an office in Austin. We have 14 people on East Cesar Chavez. You can come visit anytime. They like being bothered. Don't you put your hands up? Put them in the office. Put your hand. Come on. That's the Lake Flatoids. Come on, you can put your hand up. What, you're reluctant to be Lake Flato? Okay, so that's the Austin office. The Austin office is really engaged in urban design. This is South Congress Corridor. Here on the right, many of you will remember the lovely docks. It's no longer. So we've taken about 400, 500 feet, linear feet along South Congress down. It's under construction today. And I'm going to run through kind of the idea of making South Congress a new district. And again, Christy helped us with the Magdalena Hotel. So the St. Cecilia is right here on the lower end. This is the new Magdalena Hotel. And the Magdalena has 110 rooms, 7 condos, 2 restaurants, and then the whole Music Lane section on South Congress at the top has those elements noted above. Most importantly, we managed to shoehorn 498 spaces down from Congress Avenue below this block, all below grade, so that there's retail fronting the entire cityscape. There's no garage that impacts South Congress adversely, and we saved the 3 or 4 significant trees on the Music Lane site and then the 4 trees on the Magdalena. Okay, Zeke. Tell me why it's not going. I really am pitiful. I'm such a Luddite. I can barely use a phone. We're almost done. So this is a view that the office did of Music Lane. We're maxed out at 50 feet, Chris? What's the height? Come on, Chris. 60 feet. So retail at the ground floor, in this case, co-working above, using the harness and other materials that are kind of textural, building on the kind of quirky nature of South Congress, canopies, lots of trees, and then a view into the major breezeway that leads you on access to the Hotel Magdalena, across Music Lane, and then more views of the Oak Court, outdoor dining, preserving the integrity of the root system with an open porch, and then another view looking kind of towards Travis Heights from School of the Deaf, looking across Congress Avenue with this really quirky, I don't know what we're doing here. This is uncommon objects situation over here. That was our lame effort at Keep Austin Weird, maybe. Or what was it? What was it, Chris? I know it's Keep Austin Weird, but what did you call this building? You don't have a nickname for it? The WAC? Well, the WAC, okay. So I know Christy. So Christy's still lamenting the loss of the crenellated wax museum. And I'm sorry about that too. But we're happy it's gone, and this crazy quilt element is exactly where the wax museum used to be. So it was inspired by some collision of Baragon and Legaretto. I don't know what happened. We'll blame it on Juan. That is our tour. Thank you so much for listening. And it's as long as you're not asking the question. Oh, look at this fleet of foot. I'm told the sudden rush to the doors is not because of me. It's because there's a change in the schedule, and unfortunately, students still like going to class. I don't know what that's about. Actually, that's a good thing.
I have a question. With your long career and all the awards that you've won, I'm just wondering, besides the obvious meaning of a contract, is there any general definition that your firm has of success that you kind of carry on from project to project? Like, what's your definition of success?
Wow, that's a good question. So we define success early on, as Jonathan mentioned. We set rigorous performance standards for every project at the very beginning, and all those metrics are sustainable, whether it's resource recycling, water harvesting, solar energy, whatever. So I would say we value, of course we value the design awards, but really what we truly value most is when the Committee on the Environment every year gives only 10 awards in the nation for high performance buildings that are also well designed. And we've been lucky enough to win 10 of those awards. And I think that is the highest pinnacle for us of merging sustainability, performance, and design. And so that's how we measure quality in what we do, is that we meet those metrics that we set forth early in the project, that the project moves to completion in an orderly way, and that at the end of the day, nothing is more gratifying like Saturday than having 2,000 people go through a building, but more importantly, having Brenda Branch smiling ear to ear. I mean, I almost get choked up. And somehow our project manager from the city, Cindy Jordan, who has been on our case from the beginning, Even she hugged me. And so that is a major miracle and in and of itself. So I think bringing everybody along, it's always a journey, but bringing everybody forward, communicating, educating, because in Texas you have to get every project we take on, we're aspirational. And sometimes our clients are less aspirational. And our job is to make our clients more aspirational and to have it be a story about why they should be aspirational. So in the case of the library, the city was more than willing to spend the money on the systems because we showed payback systems for energy on the photovoltaic array. 25% of the resources are recycled content. That actually didn't cost us any more money. Every step that we took, we found a cistern that was part of was that part of the C home or part of the? It's part of the C home. We found this huge underground cistern that everyone had forgotten about, and it holds 200,000 gallons? 393 gallons of rainwater, condensate, etc. Of what? Algae? What did I say? Okay. Yeah, you don't get much with 393 gallons. That's not even enough milk for the year. 393,000 gallons. So we measure it by performance and by design both equally. So you have to be aspirational early. And what we've learned when we integrate with all these incredible consultants that we use, like Christie, like Datum Engineering, like the daylighting folks, they have to be brought on day one. We don't even have a meeting without everyone in the room, including the owner, the users, and in this case, the city, so that we set all these standards early, and then we try to hit each one of those metrics. Good question. We are always looking for good interns. Did I say that?
So I have a related question. It actually dovetails into that pretty well. Because you guys have gone from fairly modest beginnings to where you are now, I wonder if you might reflect on a few examples of moments where you guys know that you went to the next level, and also maybe a couple examples of strategies you implemented to get there that worked.
That's another good question. So as we started doing houses in the landscape, ranch houses primarily, and then as we got added, we were about 10 people, 12 people doing ranch houses in cities in Texas, when an opportunity arose for the Burlington Northern Santa Fe corporate headquarters in Fort Worth. And we sat down and said, what in the world, why are they even looking at us? And we thought, well, if they're looking at us, why don't we do something that everybody else wouldn't do, which is we went to the interview not with our work, because none of our work was bigger than a house. We went to the interview with images of Burlington Northern's historic railroading, trains, trestles, terminals, and we said, you're in the middle of nowhere and north of Fort Worth, you're not even next to your tracks. Why don't you make a corporate campus for 2,500 that resonates with your culture and talks about railroading? And we got the job. And we went from 12 to 25. And I gained an invaluable set of partners, Bob Harris, Andrew Herdig, and Greg Pape, and they all came to work on the Burlington Northern Santa Fe project. And from that project, it showed that we could address scale and security and master planning for a 90-acre site. And it is the place where Burlington controls every train in North America, including the commuter trains in Chicago, in this redundant concrete bunker of a building that's tornado-proof, flood-proof, and totally secured. So that was a major jumping-off point. I think we stayed true to our roots in terms of the early work, and we weren't aspiring to be something we weren't. And as we grew, we started taking on kind of attitudes about authenticity, placemaking, inspiration. and I have to say that O'Neill Ford, who was a mentor to both Ted and I, is it I or me? I never get that right. Was an inspiration because he would often tell us, he would sit us down with his cigar in his mouth and go, what would this look like as a ruin? In other words, what does it look like as essence? What's it like when time acts on it for 100 years? Get out of the way. And at the time, postmodernism was going crazy. He hated postmodernism. He had all kinds of names for it, facadism, all these things. But the main story from O'Neill was listen to vernacular architecture, listen to climate, listen to culture, and craft. And those are the 3 principles we adhere to together with science. And I think if you balance the art and architecture with the science of technology and engineering, that's where the merger is, that's where the fine line is of getting, I think, inspired places that are sustainable but also artful. Damn, that was a pretty good answer. Is that a good one to end on? I think so.